Foreign Minister has released a statement. It says that the State of Qatar expresses its strongest condemnation of the targeting of Qatari territories with Iranian ballistic missiles, considering it a flagrant violation of its national sovereignty, a direct assault on its security and the safety of its lands, and an unacceptable escalation that threatens the security and stability of the region. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs affirms that the State of Qatar reserves its full right to respond to this targeting in accordance with the provisions of international law and in proportion to the nature of the aggression, in defence of its sovereignty and to safeguard its security and national interests. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasises that the State of Qatar has been and remains among the first to call for dialogue with the Islamic Republic of Iran and has advocated for continuing on this principle as the optimal foundation for addressing differences and resolving disputes through peaceful means, thereby sparing the region the risk of escalation. Joining me is Rashid al-Mohanadi, who's the Vice President of the Centre for International Policy Research. Good to have you with us, sir. Iran has long warned that any strike would trigger retaliation across this region, and we heard our correspondent there saying that the relationship between Qatar and Iran has already been tested. How can a nation like Qatar respond without making things worse, without risking further escalation?
Well, Adrian, as all of us, we've been woken up by the news of the Israeli and US attack on Iran. And then we were also woken up again in, Saturday morning on Ramadan day, which people usually sleep in, by the warning messages we received on my mobile phones about an imminent Iranian attack. So first, I'd like to focus on the Iranian attack. The attack on June, there was apparent, enough heads up before the attack happened. This one came at a surprise and a shock to us in Qatar, and I think to the Qatari government. And it came, as waves, not as a single attack. And I think until now, Qatar has been one of the most targeted states out of all of the other Arab states being targeted by Iran. I think the decision makers in Tehran don't understand how potentially damaging this is, not just for Qatari-Iranian relations, but also to Arab-Iranian relations.
But for countries hosting US assets, as Qatar does, are they participants, bystanders? Does it make them legitimate targets regardless?
Well, the view from Doha is Al-Udeid is a Qatari base. We have defense and security relationships with multiple states, not only the US. And I think all Gulf states made it very clear that no strikes will come out of Gulf bases. And we can see that using open source information, that most of the strikes happen between the US and Israel from different vectors, not including the Gulf states. And I think what will be read now is that this is, and has been in the statements we've read from all the Gulf states, that this is an attack on Qatari and Gulf sovereignty.
Let's bring in our correspondent one more time, Zain Basravi, who's here in Doha. Zain, earlier today, all of us here living in Qatar, we had alerts on our phone, several of them, advising us to shelter in place immediately. I see the road behind you there is fairly busy right now. I mean, how do people in Doha feel about what's happened today?
Well, when we were out in the morning by the Corniche and we were reporting from there, the alerts were coming in, people were aware, you could hear the explosions, and there were multiple already. But it does give you a sense of how incongruous this kind of violence is to what a peaceful place the GCC has been for so long. A peaceful place on the edge of all kinds of conflicts. And people were really unaffected. They were going about their business. There were tour groups coming in, cycling groups coming in, they were taking pictures. And it went on for a good long while. It wasn't until a few hours in that the crowd began to dissipate and people began to go back. But as we can see, there's still traffic on the streets. Largely, people are staying home, those that are residents here, but life is continuing. And even though these attacks have been consistent throughout the day, dozens of interceptions have happened throughout the day, it isn't this sort of widespread chaos that no doubt Iran is experiencing, for instance. But one thing that we should point out is that Qatar has been a long-time ally of Iran. Even Saudi Arabia has enjoyed much warmer relations with Iran in recent years. And diplomatically, this is going to be a real strain. It's going to be a strain going forward that is likely to affect life in all of these cities. Earlier today, there was a phone call between Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Again, two people that have been, in one form or another, advocates and allies of Iran in the past 12 to 14 months, despite perhaps the less than cordial relations that Saudi and Iran have had in the past. But most recently, there has been call for cooperation. Every country here in the Gulf that's come under attack today has said that it would not let its space be used for attacks being launched onto Iran, even though it may host different U.S. assets. Both sides in that phone call, the two leaders of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they emphasized the necessity for an immediate cessation of all escalatory actions and a return to dialogue to preserve the region's security and prevent a slide into wider confrontations. Now, that's a statement from the Emir Diwan here in Qatar. But the reality is what the U.S. is telling newspapers and outlets in the United States is that this is likely to be the first day of a campaign that will go on for at least a week, at least until the end of the week. So we are likely to see more interceptions, more explosions, more escalation in the days ahead.
All right, Zain, for the moment, many thanks indeed. Back to Rashid. Of course, Qatar known for the role it plays as a mediator, a peacemaker. What would a realistic off-ramp for Iran look like now? And who has the leverage to create it? Could Qatar somehow get involved, even though it's one of the nations that is coming under attack?
That's a really good question, Adrian. I think currently the priority is for de-escalation. I don't see a diplomatic off-ramp forming anytime soon. We might see in the coming days. Depends on how intensive the strikes are on both sides. I think only time will tell if we can reach a condition where we can find a diplomatic off-ramp. But like all the states in the region have called for, the next step is, I think, deconflicting and de-escalation on both sides. Because nobody in the region benefits from what's happening, what happened today and potentially will happen for the next week or coming weeks. You know, as a defense analyst, one of the good things that I noticed was how prepared the Qatar armed forces were in terms of interceptions. And until now, the level of interceptions have been quite good. We hope we don't need to intercept any missiles anytime soon, but it's just an important thing to put it out there compared to and building on the lessons learned from last year.
Really good to talk to you. Rashid, many thanks indeed.
Much,
That's Rashid al-Mohanadi there.
Thanks.